Hello there. This is November the 18th, 2022, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the subject of being agnostic. This has just been coming up recently. I've been meeting a lot of new people, and some of them have been identifying themselves as being agnostic, which just kind of means that they don't want to say that there isn't a God, but they don't want to say that there is a God. They're just wanting to say, well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, and we'll see, kind of a person. It's just kind of a decision, and they have a label. We have a label for it. We call that being agnostic in that sense. I have found that as I've talked with people over the years who identify themselves this way, that I could probably divide them up into two different possible categories. The first category is someone who is reasonably open to the conversation, who is willing to have a conversation about maybe there is a God, and are not just closed off to the idea. And then there's the other kind of person who is closed off to the idea that they would prefer to be agnostic. They love being agnostic. That's what they want. And they don't want to be on either side of that label. That's just what they really want to have. Let me talk about those people first, and then I'll go back to the people who are still open to conversation. Okay, now for those who consider themselves to be agnostic and they really want to stay that way, from my personal experience of those who I have encountered, I would consider them to be spiritual cowards. All right, I'm going to use that word, which is a really strong word, but that's what I get the sense of. All right, that they're just total cowards when it comes to the subject, and they're hiding behind this label, being agnostic, in order to try to protect themselves from conflict or to protect themselves from other people who may reject the existence of God. There are people around them probably. I've seen this happen a lot, that there are people around them who reject God entirely. And in order to stay friends with them, in order to maintain some sense of peace, they say, well, maybe there is no God. I don't know. I don't want to know, kind of thing. And then with those who do believe that there is a God, they can be quite aggressive on the other end of the scale as well. Then this gives them a place of safety to say, well, maybe there is. Maybe there is. I don't know. So for one group, they can say, maybe there is. I don't know. Leave me alone. And for the other group, they can say, well, maybe there isn't. That's fine. Leave me alone. To me, that represents a coward. All right. I mean, you should really answer this kind of a question with sincerity and with conviction, and that's about all that I can do with somebody like that. Now, with those who do have a sincere interest, all right, there are a few things that I could probably say that you would find useful, that I think you would appreciate. And of course, if you have some questions for me that you'd like to ask, do feel free to send them to me by email. This is just a general recording that I'm doing right now in order to open the subject, to present the topic. There are a few things that I can say. The first thing that I would like to say is that you've probably noticed that there is no way really to prove the existence of God. All right, and I could say that from a scientific point of view or a mathematical point of view. I've been doing the work of the ministry exclusively for a long time. But before I was doing this, I was a scientist. I know a lot about how to prove things. I used to teach classes that included proofs. I've done a lot of proving kind of stuff. All right, I know the topic of proofs, and I can recognize that there's no way that you can prove that God exists or that he doesn't exist. There's no way. And what I would like you to see is that this is what God wants, all right? I mean, I know you have to consider the possibility. We have to make the assumption that there is a God. If there is a God, all right, if we make that assumption, then he wants it to be impossible for us to prove that he exists. Okay? And you should consider that this is intentional. That this is not to say that God has some kind of communication problem. or he's inept, or that he's made a mistake or something. But he's done this on purpose. He has structured our world, and he has related to the world in a way that we cannot prove his existence. This is intentional. This is what he wants. And of course, you have to ask the question, well, why? Why would he want that, right? I mean, why would he be so intentional about this? And from what I can see, the reason why is because he does not want to apply force. Okay? He does not want to force you to believe in him. If you were able to prove his existence, well, then you would be confronted with such evidence that you would be forced to acknowledge him, and you would be forced to have some kind of a relational experience with him. So I think that this is the most important thing to consider when it comes to the idea of being agnostic, and to recognize that if you assume that there is a God, if you take that into consideration, that the way that he has related to us in this context is on purpose, okay? And it's for a good reason. And one of these reasons is so that you are not forced to believe in him. So what would this tell you about this God? It would tell you that you have this person who wants you to be in his life because you want to be in his life. And if you don't want to be in his life, then he wants you to have that option. Okay? Now, of course, you're only going to be physically alive for so long. And when you are physically dead, it's unlikely that he's going to have a place for you in his home. He's going to have to put you somewhere else, which you're not going to like that place. All right? But in this case, while you are here, this is something he's doing on purpose, okay? That he is not going to force you to have a relationship with him. And definitely, when you physically die, you're definitely not going to be forced to have a relationship with him. You're going to go somewhere else that you don't want to be. But he wants people in his life who are in his life because they really want to be in his life, because they do really want to know who he is. And if you will make that decision that you really want to know who he is, then he has provided enough evidence to show you that he exists. All right? He has provided enough to satisfy him. He feels that he has provided enough. You may feel that he has not provided enough. In that case, I would say you need to keep looking. All right? And you probably have decided to stop looking. But for myself, I have found enough evidence for myself that shows that he exists, and that's what got me started. That's what got me started. I asked the question to myself and to God, do you even exist? I was confronted with this myself, and this is how I approached it. I approached it in this way, and I realized eventually, I found enough evidence that I could say this is enough. It's not perfect. It's not a proof, but it is enough that I personally can say, based on this collection of evidence that is present, to me, that is enough to say there has to be a God. And I would like to know who he is. You need to find the evidence that will convince you. It probably isn't going to be the same kind of evidence that convinced me. All right? But, feel free to ask people, what is the evidence that they see that convinced them? And some of that you may be able to embrace for yourself. All right? But that's how I would suggest that a person deal with this issue of being agnostic, that it's either being a spiritual coward or it's being honest, and you're going to continue an honest pursuit. And so that's what I could say about it in general. Should you have any specific questions that you think you might like to ask me that maybe I could give some unique insight on? I suspect I said a few things in this recording that you've not heard before or you didn't expect. Maybe I got something else that might be useful. Do send me an email to aaron@aaronbudgeon.net. And if I can, I'll say what I can. If I have no answer, I'll just tell you that. Say, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this one. I don't have a problem saying one or the other. All right, thank you.